one station, KELP.
915 TALK.
The world is looking at El Paso.
What will we say to the world? Live from the KELP studio in El Paso, this is 915 Talk.
And now your host.
Borderland, this is 915 Talk, and I am your host, Andy Frecka. We are live this December 27th year of our Lord 2024. Kenny on the board. How was your Christmas? You have a good Christmas?
Yeah, it was good.
It was good. Okay. What's the best part of Christmas, Kenny on the board?
The best part of Christmas?
Yeah.
It was the beginning of the end of the plan of salvation for us.
That's very good, Kenny on the board. That was kind of a trick question because we are a Christian radio station. I was afraid you were going to say the presents, but it's actually...
No, all I got was a blanket for Christmas.
A blanket?
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
I'll be warm.
A blanket's good. It's Christmas week, and I was thinking, what can we do on Christmas week to make this week extra special on 915 Talk? And what would you recommend to make 915 Talk special on Christmas week, Kenny on the board? What could we do?
I think we did it. We have 2-minute PSAs with other pastors talking about the meaning of Christmas and stuff, and to bring one of them in and talk.
Yeah, we could have done that. That's not what we did.
I know you went a different route.
Yeah, but yeah. I thought let's bring in a special guest, the most special guest that we've ever had on 915 Talk. As a matter of fact, it's the only guest to ever have a repeat guestship, a repeat performance. I had a lot of great feedback the last time she was on.
Cool.
Yeah.
It was good?
Yeah, it was good. Right. I mean, it was more than good. It was great, Kitty on the board. Because
I don't want to make the other people jealous.
Well, because she's my wife. She's my wife. So it was more than good. She is the head of school at Emmanuel Christian School. She is the love of my life. She is my wife. She's now put up with me for almost 25 years, which is pretty impressive. In dog years, that's like 160 years.
I'm sure she feels like that sometimes.
Yeah, and we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about the spiritual formation of a generation. You have any thoughts on that, Kenny, on the board?
Spiritual formation of a generation.
Yeah.
I think we've been slacking in this generations that are coming.
So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about school choice. I think that'll be interesting. There's a lot to unpack in the next hour. I should mention that we're on 1590 AM in El Paso, 95.9 FM, 89.3 FM in Las Cruces, streaming worldwide on KELPradio.com. And Mac Daddy Del Norte is running our YouTube Live and Facebook Live. So if you are at home, which a lot of people are this week, you can tune in on YouTube and watch the conversation. You can watch the radio. Right. So without further ado, let's give a very warm Borderland welcome to the one, the only, Mrs. Rachel Frecka. Mrs. Frecka, welcome to 915 Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. We have a lot to talk about today, but the last time you were on, we talked a little bit about. I mentioned a story. I mentioned a story from your past, and people wanted to hear more. And it was about when you were in Kenya and you were attacked by a witch doctor.
Okay.
So before we talk about the spiritual formation of children, a spiritual formation of a generation. Tell us what happened with the witch doctor in Kenya.
Okay. Well, as you all know, we've been with YWAM for many, many years.
Okay.
And,
Youth with a Mission.
Youth with a Mission. And when you start off in Youth with a Mission, you do what we call a DTS, a Discipleship Training School.
Uh-huh.
So my discipleship training school, I spent 3 months in Montana, and then we went to Kenya, Africa, for our practical portion of our school for another. I guess it was 10 weeks, so it wasn't quite 3 months.
Okay.
And I was 16 at the time.
So you were 16 years old. So we're going to be talking about education here in a little bit. What was your education like? That at 16 you weren't in school anymore, or?
So I most of the years I was in El Paso, I attended parochial school. So I started off at St. Luke's out in Canutillo, and then was at St. Clement's for most of my grade school up into middle school, and then I homeschooled. I was actually one of the few homeschoolers back in the day in El Paso. And then when my mom and dad went on the mission field, then I kept homeschooling and finished early.
So I feel like this is kind of like a dark secret of Emmanuel Christian School, that their head of school was actually homeschooled.
I'm actually pretty open about it.
Oh,
so
you are?
Okay,
Yeah,
I've shared.
Okay, so it's okay that we're saying
It's
this
okay.
on live
Yeah,
radio?
no, it's not
Okay.
a deep dark secret.
Yeah, all right.
I'm very open about it.
So you were homeschooled and you finished early.
Yes.
And why did you finish early?
I mean, when you homeschool, you can just get a lot more done in a day, and I was anxious to get out of the house, and so, and I think honestly, my parents were anxious to get me out of the house, so they went along with it.
Okay, so also, as our son Benny says, sometimes you can be a tryhard. So you
Sometimes, yes.
So you did finish high school early at the age of 16. Then you went to YWAM, Youth with a Mission, a discipleship training school. You're in Kenya. You're 16 years old, and you were attacked by a witch doctor. So what happened?
I think honestly, a lot of it was just because I was so young and I wasn't really mature yet in the faith and in spiritual warfare. And we were in a very dark place spiritually. We weren't in the city. We were out in the bush where there's a lot of paganism and a lot of witchcraft. And this one lady, she just had it out for me. I don't know what it was, but at night she would walk around our hut and profess curses over us, and we would have nightmares. And every time it would be my turn to preach, wherever we were, I mean, we would walk hours to some village through the bush to preach or share testimonies. And she would always show up, and she would always...
Same one?
The same lady. She would always show up, and she would come out through the crowd and start harassing me. And
you specifically?
Me specifically, yeah. And
so you kind of had like a fan.
Yeah, I guess so. But the very last time, it was one of our last days in Africa, and I was honestly quite anxious to come back to America and civilization and a hot shower. And we walked for a couple of hours to this little village, and I was preaching in a church, and it was like the last time I had to preach and give my testimony. And she literally came into the church with like a large wrench, and was walking up the aisle of the church to attack me, and got almost to the pulpit before somebody stopped her. So,
yeah, well, I would hope like all the guys on the team like jumped up and
you would think,
protected you.
but it took them a minute to respond. So, yeah, it was crazy, wild times. I will say, definitely a formative experience for me.
A formative coming
as,
of age
as a person.
Yes. Okay. Well, but you're here. You haven't yet been hit by a wrench.
Nope.
So
the Lord protected me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So that's that story. I was also told a story one time you were with your friend Kim and you were attacked by a Rastafarian.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is it with you being attacked by people all the time?
If you put yourself in exciting, adventurous places and times, your stuff's gonna happen. So so stuff happened.
So what is it about your let's say teenage years that help you the most as you're leading teenagers and students?
Oh, you can tell the person asking these questions knows me very well. And those of my friends who knew me back then who might listen to this eventually will probably get a big chuckle out of all of this. But, I grew up in a Christian home, was raised in a wonderful church, surrounded by wonderful people of God. But I hit a patch as a teenager where I think I just really wanted so badly to be accepted. And I was such a people pleaser that I kind of went along with things that I shouldn't have gone along with. Mm-hmm. And found myself in a time of life when I was pretty rebellious. I started to really question my faith, started to practice behaviors and habits that were not healthy for me and were not really aligned with what I professed with my mouth about my faith in Jesus. And I feel like there were people that because of that, I felt a lot of judgment and a lot of condemnation. But then at the same time, the Lord brought men and women of God into my life who looked past the behavior and looked past the way that I was acting in the moment and really saw the calling of God on my life and spoke that over me and encouraged me in that. One of them, and I just have to do this shout out because she had such an impact on my life. For those of you who may know Bill and Christine Francis, they were the heads of YWAM El Paso for many years, and then he became a priest at St. Clement's. And she had a way of speaking truth into my life when I was in King's Kids that was without judgment, was without shame, but just brought the conviction of the Holy Spirit because it was so wrapped in love. And I really believe that she was a huge part of me ending up the person and in the calling that God had for me. And there were others, people in YWAM who really championed me. And I think even now as I work with teenagers, I think it's always the tough ones that capture my heart, the ones that I see are really struggling, who maybe aren't behaving the way they should or making the choices they need to make. But those are the ones that I really feel drawn to because I see myself in them. And
is that why you married me?
No, you were the good one when we got married.
Oh.
Yeah.
Whoa.
You put up with a lot when I was getting myself sorted out, but
well, I accept you for the way you are.
Yes, thank you. But yeah, I think we all need those adults in our lives that see us the way God sees us and see our future and not our present, and are willing to speak that into us and encourage us and hold us accountable and call us to something better. But that's, those people changed my life, and I'll be forever grateful, and I want to be that for somebody else.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point for us to kind of talk a little bit about what's happening with young people today, without me sounding like I'm just saying kids these days. But
are you a boomer?
But there are a lot of young people who are unchurched, a lot of young people in the church who are leaving the church when they get a little bit older. How would you describe the situation with where the church is with youth today, in a broad sense?
Surprising to some, I think that I have a pretty optimistic view at the moment. Obviously, there's some huge challenges for this generation. And I think we talk a lot about, social media and apathy and things like that. But it's really interesting. I was really encouraged recently. I was at a training with the Association of Christian Schools International, and they were talking about this very question of this generation and spiritual formation, and how do we as Christian schools make a difference in these kids. And it was really interesting. They brought up a lot of data from studies that have been done in recent years. And if you look at the millennial generation, one of the things that they pointed out that's characteristic of that generation was, there was a greater sense of apathy, for one.
During the millennial generation?
During the millennial generation.
Okay. And what generation are we at right now?
Right now we're in Gen Z.
Gen Z.
Yeah,
so
but we're heading out of Gen Z, actually. Our kids are becoming adults, so now we're heading into kind of a new thing.
Okay, so hold on. I'm a little slow with this. So millennials are what age?
So millennials are like, early 20s up into their 30s.
And then there's Gen Z.
And then Gen Z would be like our teenagers now.
Our kids.
Yeah.
Okay, and then after Gen Z, what's the next letter?
I think it's Alpha, or
we're starting over. Okay.
I'm not really. We're starting over. I'm not really an expert on them yet. I'm still learning about this generation.
All right.
But the thing that they found out is that the millennial generation, they had a ton of knowledge, but they didn't really have any passion for spiritual things.
Okay.
It was a more secular generation. But the thing that's interesting with this generation, with Gen Z, is that they actually do have a deep spiritual hunger. And it was interesting in one of the studies, I can't remember if it was the Pew study or the Research Center or the Barna Group, but they actually found that 77% of Gen Z actually do believe in God or some sort of higher power.
Okay.
So not Christian necessarily, but they do espouse some sort of spirituality. They're curious. They believe that there's more out there than just this physical world, which of course is a huge departure from what we know of secularism throughout this last century. And
so
then,
moving away from materialism,
Yeah.
and interest in, at least in spirituality, maybe not Christianity though. Is
Yeah.
it?
So, I mean, with secularism, we saw a lot of, we saw generations that were very much, all we know is the physical world, and, really were into secular humanism and evolution. And this generation is like, no, we think there's something out there. We think there's more.
If nothing else, there's a lot of drones over New Jersey,
Yeah.
and we can't explain that.
Yeah,
So,
so they're very, very open, and actually, the research shows that 73% of them they actually want to grow spiritually. They're craving some sort of spirituality. So with the millennials, they knew a lot, but they really weren't very interested. Like, their biblical knowledge was probably more than what this Gen Z has. But Gen Z, they lack the biblical knowledge. They don't have the teaching. They don't have the training. A lot of them have never really even been presented with the gospel. But this generation wants something. They're searching for something. And so to me, that represents a huge opportunity for those of us in the church, for those of us in Christian education. If kids are searching for something spiritual, we have the answers for them. And I think we need to, I feel like for a while we've kind of had this mentality, this woe is me, kids are leaving the church, and we've put all of it on society, that, society's the one to blame. And believe me, I know we have serious issues in society with social media and pornography and just the hedonism that we see out in the world. But I think I have a little more hope than some that that God is actually moving in a mighty way in this generation. But what they need is answers, and they need people who actually know their stuff, who are willing to present the Bible to them in a very deep and very meaningful way. And we'll probably get into this a little bit more today, but I think that we as the church need to be very careful about assuming that these kids just want to be entertained. I think that we've kind of, we shied away from really giving spiritual truth and giving biblical truth because it was hard, and it was, we didn't want to get canceled or whatever. But I think that with this generation, we need to be a little more bold in actually presenting truth to them, because they're searching for it, and they can spy a fake in an instant. I mean, these kids know hypocrisy from a mile away. They know when what we're giving them is not deep. And I think a lot of them are leaving the church not because they don't believe it or they don't want it, but just we haven't given them the depth that they're looking for. And so they're looking in other places.
So you're saying that this Generation Z, Gen Z, is interested in spiritual things. We as the church need to be open to that idea, be serious about our interactions with them. What else can be done, or how do we know if we? I don't. This is the wrong way to ask the question, but how do we know if we'll be successful in our interactions with teenagers, or how can we improve those interactions? What can be done?
I think the first thing is to be genuine. I think that we cannot give to kids from what we do not have, and so we have to make sure that we're looking at our own lives first of all, and making sure that we know our scriptures, that when they ask tough questions, that we don't just pass them off, but that we're willing to dig and to grow and to learn, so that we do have good answers to provide for them. So I think it starts with us, and then it starts with us being real with them and being genuine. And sometimes that means saying, hey, you know what? I don't know. Or yeah, I struggle with that same thing. But I know Scripture has an answer, so let's find it. Let's find it together, and let's keep digging until we get there. But it also means being very, very genuine in our adherence to truth. Like I said, kids can see inconsistencies from a mile away, and when we're preaching one thing and living something else, or when we're giving them half truths because we're afraid of the truth, they spot it and they don't respect that. I think we have to be very, very real with them.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because I don't see any churches that are trying to be incredibly seeker-friendly growing.
Yeah.
I see churches that are kind of making a stand for truth. Those are the ones that are growing.
Yeah.
And then also kind of to your point, I've said this on this program before, but I've met with a lot of pastors in our El Paso area over the past year, and some pastors are just saying this is the end. Churches are dwindling, and other pastors are struggling because they don't know if they should add another service or do another church plant. They have ushers in their church just looking for empty spots in the pews. And so it's kind of just two different ways of looking at it. And what you're saying is this next generation is hungry, and we need to be open to those difficult sometimes conversations with them, but reaching out to them and really believing that maybe they'll take our community farther than we ever took it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's interesting too. We do a survey in our school with the Association of Christian Schools International. And one of the markers that they look for in a flourishing school is a place where kids can question without fear. And I think that's another thing that we are getting better at, but that for a season was not really well received in the church. If kids asked questions about gender issues or about, other hot topics, they might feel shame. If they were struggling with something, struggling with a sin, they might feel like they were or judged. And, we have to be very careful that we find that balance between compromising the truth and compromising what we know to be right and wrong, but also not creating space for kids to question, because that is such a natural and such an important part of their spiritual formation. And so I think we as the church, we also need to be able to be comfortable with difficult conversations and comfortable with, kids coming to us and telling us that, maybe they're struggling with their sexuality or maybe they're struggling with an addiction. And it doesn't freak us out. We can sit with them and we can grieve with them and we can pray with them, and we can say, you know what, the Lord has answers for this, and we're going to stand by you until we get you there. And I think that's I've seen the impact that has in the lives of kids, and just the transformation that the Lord's brought when we're able to allow them to grapple and wrestle with God in those hard places and see Him be faithful to them in that.
Yeah. So today we are with Mrs. Rachel Frecka. She's the head of school at Emmanuel Christian School here in El Paso. She is also my wife, and this is a great way to end our Christmas week. And we have a lot more to unpack during this hour. We're going to be talking about school choice. Mrs. Rachel Frecka is also a member of the Texas Private School Association, so we'll talk a little bit about that. When we come back from our break, we will also be talking about where does family come in and all of this, where does the church come in, where do Christian schools come in and all of this. But before we go into break, I do just want to take a moment to thank the KELP Impact Partners. We have Living Hope Counseling Service. I think a lot of times as people in the church, we have difficult questions. We need someone to be with us in a difficult time. And it's difficult to ask for help, but finding help should never be difficult. And we have such a great counseling service here in El Paso. It's Living Hope Counseling Service. Their number is 915-772-2237. Reach out to them, talk to them. Also, Caring Companions, which is a service that where there's home care for the elderly. CaringCompanionsEP.com. Maybe you have parents who are in that situation and you're looking for solutions. That they'll come out, they'll talk to you, they'll talk you through the pricing absolutely free of charge. 915-307-6103. That's Caring Companions. So we're grateful to all of these impact partners. We're going to go into a short break. We'll be back. Do not touch that dial. 915 Talk is listener supported. If you believe that local Christian talk radio is important to our community, please take a moment to prayerfully consider taking part. For all donation options, including secure online giving, visit KELPradio.com and click on the Cornerstone Broadcasting link. Let's reach our neighbors in the borderland together.
915.
Testify.
I was 10 years into a 20-year bid in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, doing 23 hours a day in a cell, solitary confinement. I was at a breaking point in life where I was just hopeless, depressed. I couldn't find no peace. It brought me to my knees in a prison cell, and I met Jesus. He delivered me from addiction, from a life of crime, the gangs, from evil, wicked ways. To the gang member that's lost, to the drug addict, Jesus loves you, and no matter what you've done in this world, in this life, the doors are open. When I met Jesus Christ, he touched my heart in a powerful way. I was once a heroin addict, a thief, an all-around bad person. My name is Daniel Chavez. I'm from Central El Paso, and I just want the world to know that if he did this for me, he could do it for anybody.
They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb
and by the word of their testimony.
KELPradio.com. Christmas carols. Not only are they wonderful to sing, but their histories can be fascinating. That's why Moody Broadcasting presents Behind the Carols. Dramatic vignettes take you back in time to discover how some of your favorite carols came to be. You'll hear stories as only a grandfather can tell them. Behind the Carols. Grab some hot chocolate, pull up a chair, and join us right here.
Join us Saturday morning at 9 o'clock for this special program.
And we're back. This is 915 Talk. We are live here in the heart of the world's largest borderplex at the KELP studio. I'm your host, Andy Frecka, and I'm here with my wife today, our very special guest, who also happens to be the head of school at Emmanuel Christian School here in El Paso. We've been talking about the spiritual formation of a generation. During the break, before we get into that, during the break, you heard a couple announcements. One was 915 Testify. If you're enjoying those, reach out to the station. Let us know about that. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can just use that contact form at KELPradio.com. And I'm also excited because we're going to be adding a lot more testimonies to 915 Testify in January. We're working hard on that. God is doing a lot of things here in our community, and it's important for us to share those great things with each other, encourage each other, and also be sharing with a community that's just driving down I-10 right now, flipping through stations. Hey, God's working here in El Paso. He's doing something in our lives. So 915 Testify. And then the other announcement is, very sadly, tomorrow there'll be no trading post at 9 a.m. Instead, there will be the Christmas Carol special. So be sure to tune in. I do hope that you as the listeners have noticed we've made a special effort to really celebrate Christmas this December. We're doing our best to celebrate Christmas, so we hope that you're celebrating with us. Mrs. Rachel Frecka, we're back. We've been talking about the spiritual formation of a generation. Where does family come in?
Where does family come in? Well, family's pretty important in all of this. It's interesting. I think as parents, we all have this concern. We do our best raising Christian kids. We do our best. We take them to church. We read them the Word. But I think at the back of many of our hearts and minds, there is this anxiety because we see so many kids that grow up in the church and go off to college and then completely walk away from their faith. And so I think a lot of us are, we ask ourselves a question like, how do I make sure that doesn't happen to my kids? What do I do about that? And it is very disheartening to see, again, I think it was the Pew Research Center that did a study, and these are probably familiar numbers to many of our listeners, but of those who are raised in Christian homes, who head off to college as believing, professing Christians, about 70% of them complete college, go off into adulthood, and completely walk away from their faith. So,
what percentage? 70?
According to the Pew Research Center, it's close to 70. I think Barna Group, it was closer to 75. I could be mixing up those numbers, but basically, at the end of the day, about 3/4 of the kids that are growing up in church are not continuing as believers into adulthood.
So whose fault is that?
Well, I think I think it's a lot of factors. I mean, I think, as parents, I know even for us as a family, we weren't perfect. We did our best. But our kids have all had their own journey as well, So I can't say that we could say, oh, well, this is the reason, or this is the cause. I think there's a lot to it, but I think we do have to ask the question, why is this happening, and what can we do so that we see more and more kids really embracing their faith as children and then carrying it on into adulthood and passing that on to their kids. A lot of the research has kind of boiled it down to four different things, four different factors that really impact the spiritual formation of a child and whether that faith is going to last.
Okay.
Obviously, church is important.
Yes.
If kids don't grow up in the church, I think of our family. For our family, their friends are from their church. That means that they're around other Christian families. They have that environment that they're in on a regular basis. Hopefully they're in Sunday school and have great youth pastors that are speaking into their lives. So obviously, being part of a church is an important step in all of this. Research shows that another major factor is their peers. And it's amazing to me more and more to hear parents say, well, my kids want this or my kids want that. We have parents come to us all the time that say, I really want my kid in Christian education, but they really want to go to public school, so they're going to go to public school next year. And I think that's always a little bit strange to me that we're letting our kids make those choices for themselves rather than making those choices for them. And one of those is the friends that they spend their time with.
Okay.
We know that the peers that our kids have, especially through the teenage years, are a major, major force in who they're going to be as adults. And so we have to really keep that in mind and maybe be a little bit more choosy about the people that we allow them to spend their time with.
So a big factor is what friends they have.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the older they get. I think when they're little, it's not as big a factor. But as they get into those teenage years, it becomes hugely important who they're spending their free time with.
Okay. Well, I hate to interrupt. We're going to get back to this very soon, but we're about to have our special live traffic report. Is that right, Kenny, on the board? All right. Charlie 1, you're live on 915 Talk. Good afternoon. Did you have a good Christmas?
Yes, Andy, thanks to the Lord. You know that what counts the most to me is being in good health and having, my family good and healthy. So I'm thankful for that. And, as I get older and older and older than the hills, I thank God that I'm still alive and kicking. Well, at least halfway kicking. I don't really kick that much. But,
yeah. How many years have you been doing traffic reports, Charlie 1?
Oh, at different radio stations. Goes back to about 1980.
Yeah, I saw a newspaper report with you standing on bridges with a cell phone. Is that what you're still doing, or you have an updated method?
Oh well, that picture was taken for the newspaper for so that the newspaper could use it. They sent the reporters out there, and I was on the bridge there of the freeway, and that's why that was taken there.
Okay,
but I'll tell you what, the best way to do traffic is to do it. I'm here at home. I have 3 different tablets with I-10 situations. I have one on I-10, US 54, 357. So the best way to do it is at home here in a control situation, because I've done it before when I have to do it for some reason or another. Somebody gets sick or something, and I've gone out on the road with my traffic, and that's very difficult, Andy, to be driving and doing traffic at the same time. Very difficult.
I can only imagine. So technology helps.
And I was younger when I used to do that more often, but not young anymore.
Yeah.
Can't do that stuff anymore. And besides that, it's dangerous to be multitasking, like especially driving on the streets with the way people cut in front of you. And in fact, one time, Andy, I was driving on the freeway close to the Spaghetti Bowl, and then I was giving a report live, and I was, and then all of a sudden, to the right lane and to the right of me, the crash happens, and I'm like, and in traffic on the freeway right now, a crash just happened. And then another time I was on Mesa, and I was traveling on Mesa southbound, and then a car ran a stop sign, jumped over the median, hit a car right in front of me, and again, it was one of those situations where a crash just happened.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. You were talking last week about how there's traffic every day in El Paso because of the sun glare.
Yes, absolutely.
What parts of the city did you say?
Well, as you're traveling in the afternoon, There's two things here. In the afternoon, you're traveling towards the downtown area, and that the sun's going down on the west side, and that sun will hit you right there at the downtown overpasses. Right there, the sun will begin to hit you there around that Schuster, Porfirio Diaz downtown area, and it'll get right in your face.
Right.
And so and so what happens is that the traffic will slow down to like a crawl until you get past that area right there.
Gotcha.
So
I think what we're learning from this is Alamo Glass Pros has the answer to all that. AlamoGlassPros.com. They're friends of mine. They're really good people, and you can get that glare protection on your windshield. You don't have to get a really dark windshield. You don't need to look like you're working for organized crime or anything like that. You just get that glare control, and then you can come around that corner, and you can be part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
That's what's needed, actually, because another trouble spot is if you're traveling eastbound in the morning, going to the east side, and that sun's popping up there on the east, it's, again, it's going to get right in your eye, right in your face.
Yeah,
right
my guest today is talking about that. She's nodding her head to you, going east every morning when she goes to work on her way to Emmanuel Christian School. So what are you seeing on the road today, Charlie One?
Well, here's a trouble spot that we have right now. Now, normally, I would have more crashes going on right now with school being in session and everybody working. But being that festive holiday mode that we're in right now, but we do have a trouble spot here. We have a crash, and this is on Airway between the Gateway and Gateway East. So that overpass right there on Airway between Gateway and Gateway East, they're dealing with a crash right there. So expect some congestion right there. That's the only trouble spot that we have. But I see some pockets of kind of busy, almost slowing down right here. I-10 West, Paisano to Chelsea, busy traffic right there, so that's another trouble spot. Now, on the west side, a little bit of slowing going on here, I-10 West at Mesa, even the CD lane, so there's another spot. You're not going to slow down dramatically, but just be prepared for a little bit of slowing there, I-10 West at Mesa. Those are the tight spots right now, Andy.
Yeah, okay. Well, fortunately, I think people today are still celebrating Christmas, so the roads aren't quite as busy, but we appreciate all of your work, Charlie One. Do we have Daily Menudo? What do we have today?
Oh, if you love that menudo, we got it there at Mi Polito Cafe, 3123. We have the breakfast, lunch, dinner special, the Mexican plates, the menudo every day. Vegetarian options if you're on a diet or something like that. The line 35 Comida Corrida. And the address is Mi Polito Cafe, 3123. And Andy, I just want to wish everybody, I know Christmas is past us now, but everybody a very happy, great year to come, and hopefully a very good year in 2025.
Yeah, well, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you, Charlie One.
You bet, Andy.
Yeah, we'll talk later.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're back with Mrs. Rachel Frecka, my wife, and also the head of school at Emmanuel Christian School. We were talking about the importance of the family and spiritual formation, and the importance of what kids or what friends your kids have. And so, as a parent, Mrs. Rachel Frecka, how do you influence your children to have the right friends? Asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend. I think it depends a lot on the environment that they're in. And that kind of leads to the third factor in what really influences a kid's spiritual formation as they're growing up. So, church, of course, is important, choosing their friends. But, yeah, it's a good question. Where are they going to get their friends? And most of them are going to find their friends in school.
Okay.
School or the church youth group, maybe friends of the family. And so the third major factor that they've identified is their school. And I feel like, it should be pretty obvious, but it isn't always. And, if we think about it, our kids spend at a minimum 6 to 8 hours a day in school 5 days a week.
Right.
That's the environment that they are most immersed in throughout the week. And so the teachers that they're interacting with, the students that they're interacting with, the pool of young people that they're choosing friends from is going to have a major impact. And I think a lot of times, in Christian education, we talk about public schools in a negative way, and, and we talk about the ideology, and I think all of that is true, but I think that, there's a whole gamut of schooling opportunities, and we as parents really need to prayerfully consider what the best option is for our children, and really ask the Lord. For some, it might be that they really need to be in a Christian school, in a Christian environment. I mean, of course, as a Christian school leader, I would say for most. But sometimes the Lord leads a family to have them in a public school. But if you're going to do that, you really have to be aware of what's happening in that school. You need to know the teachers. You need to know what they're being taught. And you need to be up on who they're spending their time with. So obviously school is a huge factor. So church, their friends, their school. But at the end of the day, studies prove that the biggest factor in whether a child is going to grow up following and loving the Lord is going to be what happens in the home. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting. I just said that they spend 6 to 8 hours a day at school, 5 days a week. So the amount of time that they're spending outside of the home is more than they're probably spending with us. But at the end of the day, there's no greater factor than their parents. And I actually heard an interesting statistic not long ago that it kind of shook me, if I'm being honest. It really challenged me. And they were saying in this study that 25, if one parent in the home is a believer, there's a 25% chance that child will continue in the faith as an adult.
If one parent is a believer.
If one parent.
Okay.
Now, the interesting thing is that if two parents are believers, that number goes up to 50%.
Okay.
Only 50%. Mm-hmm. So just growing up in a Christian home with two Christian parents is no guarantee that a child is going to grow up to know and serve the Lord. However, if both parents are believing Christians and they do regular family devotions or Bible reading together as a family, that number goes up to 90%.
Wow.
And I think that really demonstrates the importance that we as parents play in the spiritual formation of our children. We have got to get away from this idea that if we just take them to church, if they're in a youth group, it's covered. We got them covered, especially if you have your kids in Christian school. A lot of times, we hear parents say or, maybe kind of hint at, well, that's your job. You guys do. We put them in Christian school so that you could teach them the Bible. But I mean, studies prove that that's not how it works. It has to be happening in the home. And, I feel like as I reflect now that my kids are leaving us, we did our best. We could have done more, but I am grateful for the times that I can remember us sitting together as a family and studying the Word of God, or even just having conversations over spiritual matters. And I don't think as parents that we can underestimate the impact that has on the lives of our kids.
Right. Love it. There's so much more that we could talk about with that. But what I've learned with our audience, Kenny, on the board is that they love to talk about politics. So we're going to talk a little bit about politics. School choice. You're on the the board of the Texas Private School Association. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty big deal. I don't know if it's a big deal or not, but you leave from time to time to go to Austin for meetings. But this is I've talked with different pastors who are talking about opening schools just because they think that this change in policy will help the school financially. I'm going to explain to you school choice how I understand it, okay. And then I want you to tell me how I'm wrong. Okay. So in El Paso, we have very high property taxes. Most of those go to EPISD. Not most of them, a lot of them, a high percentage. And if my kids are going to a private school, all that money is going to go to the private school. The private school will become incredibly wealthy, and all the staff will be rolling in the dough. Did I get that right?
Not really, no. Not exactly.
Okay, so how will school choice work?
Okay, well, first of all, let me just say I am not an expert on this topic.
Well, since my wife works at a private Christian school, I'm a little bit disappointed that that's not how it works.
I'll share what I know,
okay,
or what I think I know. And I would recommend, if this is a topic that your listeners are really interested in, especially with the legislation coming up in January, I would recommend that you have Laura Colangelo, the executive director of TPSA, come and give a lot more information. But there are a lot of myths surrounding school choice.
Did I hit them all with my explanation?
Not all of them. No, there are even more myths than that. But really, at the end of the day, I think the biggest myth is that school choice is going to take money from the private schools. It's going to defund the private schools. Defund the public schools, and that it's going to somehow deprive It's gonna boost the options for middle and high class families and shortchange the lower class families. And
Okay.
that is the biggest misnomer surrounding school choice. So basically, what is on the table at the moment is legislation that would provide for parents who would prefer to have their children in a private school,
Okay.
essentially an educational savings account that would be funded by the Texas budget,
Okay.
that would allow them an allotted amount of money, anywhere, they're saying probably between $8,000 and $10,000 a year per student, so that
Okay.
those families who choose to opt in to an ESA would be able to select a private school for their child to attend.
Okay.
Now, it is not a free-for-all, and I think that's where a lot of the misunderstanding comes. First of all, right now, universal school choice is not really on the table. That's not, and unless something major happens in January with the rewriting of some of these bills, that's not what they're talking about. At the moment, the discussion is about a school choice bill that would provide for low-income families and for children with special needs to be able to open an ESA that's funded by the government so that they could choose a private school for their children. The cap on that, I think they're talking about $100,000 income for a family of four.
Okay.
So families below that income level could apply for an educational service savings account that would be funded through the comptroller's office, and then they could use those funds to pay for private school education. Now, the thing that a lot of schools and a lot of churches and a lot of individuals don't realize is that there are going to be very clear guidelines for what schools this would qualify for. The Texas Private Schools Association is working very, very hard to make sure that any school choice bill that is passed, first of all, protects the autonomy and religious freedom of private schools. That is
Right.
the one non-negotiable. That if this is going to happen, private schools have to be protected. The other thing that they're really, really making sure about is that if this happens, that it does not lower the access to quality education for children in Texas. So what that means is that you couldn't just open up a school in your house and call it a school and kids could use their vouchers for that. That's not at all what's going to happen. Any school, as it's currently written, and TPSA again is fighting very hard
Feels
for
like my
this.
plan was foiled just there.
Yeah,
I was going to
sorry.
open up a school in my house.
Yeah, unfortunately, no. Any school that would qualify to be a recipient of an ESA they would have to be accredited with. It's called TEPSAC. It's the Texas TEPSAC. It's the Texas Private Parochial School
Association.
I'm not very good
of,
with all the acronyms.
Of curriculum.
Yeah. But basically,
made that
they
up.
are the accrediting consortium that TEA, or the Texas Educational Agency, has approved. So you would have to be an accredited private school under the auspices of TEPSAC and TEA to even be able to be considered to receive these funds.
Okay.
So what that does is that, first of all, it protects kids from ending up in an educational situation that is not high quality, and that school is basically making money off of them.
Right.
So we're talking about pretty much existing private and Christian schools at this point. The other thing is that the big myth is that this is going to come from the public school budget. As it stands now, I don't, forgive me if I get this number wrong, but I think it's like 1% or less than 1% that's actually going to be coming from the current public school budgets to fund this. It's a separate funding from the Texas state budget. It does not affect EPISD or YISD
okay.
or their budgets, but unfortunately, that is kind of the misnomer, and so a lot of people feel like the public schools are going to be robbed, and that's just not the case. This is separate funding. But, again, we talked a few moments ago about, spiritual formation and the importance of schools. And honestly, I can say, as a Christian parent who chooses Christian education for my children, I really believe that should be a fundamental right that we as parents have to make decisions about the education of our children and to have opportunities to educate them in a way that aligns with our values and with our priorities. And currently, that is just not the reality for a large number of Christian families. It's just cost prohibitive, and it's not that the Christian schools are making a killing. I mean, we for the most part charge less than it actually costs to educate a child in one of our schools, but we should have those options, and I think particularly of those families who don't make $100,000 or $150,000 a year and are simply not going to be able to choose private school education or Christian school education unless this passes. So there's a lot of conversation around this right now. There's a lot of information coming and going, and I don't think anybody really can say for sure what this bill will look like when it's passed. I think it's probably more when than if. But I think this is something that we really need to be praying about, praying that whatever legislation is passed, that it really be for the benefit of all children in the state of Texas. I think that, it has been very successful in other states and has actually improved outcomes even for kids in public schools. So we just need to pray that the Lord really move in the hearts of our legislators as they make these decisions, and pray for TPSA and for the different people that are on the ground in Austin right now, sitting and reading bills and meeting with legislators to make sure that whatever happens, that Christian schools can continue doing what they're called to do, and kids will continue to be served.
Yeah, so I think that this, out of everything you said, what I heard was, if you're planning to start a school because you think school choice is happening, read the fine print.
Yes.
Okay.
and don't do it, but
Yeah.
just keep in mind you're going to have to get accredited.
Yeah, because El Paso absolutely needs more private Christian schools.
Absolutely.
But don't make school choice your reason. So appreciate all of that. Kenny on the board. It's Christmas. It's Christmas week. And so I think the best way for us to close out this episode of 915 Talk is with the lightning round.
Okay, let's do it.
It's going to be a true lightning round. We don't have a lot of time left, but I want to know what Mrs. Rachel Frecka thinks about some of these things. So without further ado, Kenny on the board, cue up the lightning round.
Lightning round.
And so you know the rules. You know the rules.
I do, yes.
Yes. So I ask the questions, you give the answers.
Yes.
We do it quickly. We are Christian radio, so we do believe in right and wrong answers, but we also try not to be judgy because we're Christian radio if you do give a wrong answer.
Okay.
So first question, best homeschool curriculum.
Sunlight.
Do you have anything to add to that?
No, there's so many great homeschool curricula out there. I'm a big fan of classical education, and so some of the curricula that are more classical based, I think, are excellent. Our family used Sunlight because it was very missions minded and a lot of reading books.
Sunlight,
which I think
a lot of book reading.
Yes.
I just learned what curriculum we use for homeschooling.
Yes.
This is good. Next question. KELP recently had a Christmas party. At that Christmas party, you created a game for everyone to play.
Yes.
What was that game, first of all? How would you describe it?
Well, it was based on the Cranium game, so it was
It's
a
like
mix of
charades
and trivia and karaoke and.
Okay, and whose team won that game?
Oh, I can't remember. It must have been your team, or you wouldn't have.
That
brought
is
it up.
correct. Kenny on the board. That is correct. No applause?
He wasn't on your team.
There we go. Kenny on the board did not win, so he didn't want to play the applause. But definitely my team won at the KELP Christmas party game that Rachel so kindly made for us. Okay, let's say you had the opportunity to influence the host of 915 Talk. What is one thing you would change about 915 Talk?
Oh gosh, way to put me on the spot.
I hate to put you on the spot. Mac Daddy Del Norte's laughing. What is one thing you would change?
I would like to hear some guests from Las Cruces.
That's a great. That's great feedback. Okay, so next question. In 2025, you are going to celebrate with your husband, with me, your 25-year anniversary. That's a pretty big deal. How would you like to celebrate your 25-year anniversary?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I saw the coolest thing on Instagram today. Did you know that in Big Ben...
Wait, hold on.
What?
You have Christmas break. I thought you were like spending time in the Word. I don't know, churning butter.
I do check out Instagram.
You're on Instagram?
Okay. From time to time, yes.
Okay, so what'd you see on Instagram?
In Big Ben National Park, you can stay in a cave. It's like a hotel room in a cave, out in the middle of nowhere with the most gorgeous views of Big Ben National Park. I don't think it's cheap.
Okay.
But it looks amazing, and I would love to do that.
For a 25-year anniversary. That answer is correct. Kenny on the board. Okay, so during this episode of 915 Talk, we've been talking about the spiritual formation of the next generation. Who is your favorite biblical hero who mentored young people? And you can't say Gamaliel because that's what you said last time.
I don't think that was the question that I answered last time, but Jesus.
Okay.
I mean, it's true. I love that he asked questions to help people get to their own answers, and he didn't just feed them information. He really got to their heart by asking deep, probing questions.
I love that. I love that, Kenny, on the board, because I think a lot of times we're afraid to ask questions, particularly of young people, because they might give the wrong answers. And then what?
Or a controversial one.
Or a controversial answer.
Yes.
But Jesus was always asking questions. When I was a sales manager, that's what I taught people. I taught my team. I said, be like, was it Socrates? Was he the one who always asked questions? Mm-hmm. Yeah, be like Socrates and be like Jesus. Always ask questions of your customers. Don't just feed them information. I think that's a great way to just kind of wrap up what we've been talking about today. Don't be afraid to ask questions of young people. Find out where they're at, and pray that God will open up those deeper conversations. Rachel, thank you for coming in for 915 Talk today. What would you like to do after 915 Talk?
Dinner and a movie.
Yeah. Thanks again for coming in. That's what Mrs. Frecka and I will be doing after 915 Talk. It was funny when you came on last time on the Emmanuel Christian School Facebook page. There were pictures of me and you after the program, kind of like standing very close to each other and kind of a side hug, and there was no explanation that I was your husband. So so maybe if you're ever on Facebook again, let's clarify that.
Gotcha.
But appreciate you coming in. Just as a reminder to our listeners, you can find this and all other episodes of 915 Talk on KELPradio.com. Just look for that 915 Talk link. We're just looking at how we can share more of what's going on in El Paso. As we say at the end, let's learn to love our city, love our neighbor, and give God all the glory. This has been 915 Talk.
You have been listening to 915 Talk on KELP Christian Radio. To listen to past recordings of 915 Talk, just visit KELPradio.com and click on the 915 Talk link. Until next time, love your neighbor, love your city, and give God all the glory.